Hey, welcome. This is The Process. My name is Dr. John Bush. Welcome. This is our deep dive into quarterback metrics. This is lesson 112. We just finished or started, or I guess posted 111. So 111. This is what, 12? Probably have about three more, maybe, looking at all the metrics that I use to prep my season. And that's the whole part of this, is to get you up to speed on the background, let's call it your foundation for understanding each of the positions. And then that should help you move forward for drafting in the summer here. So it's early April, and we're rocking and rolling here uh, in that. So let's continue our journey here. Yeah. So this is a year, and this is uh, three. I'm sorry, four slices of the end of the season fantasy point average for quarterbacks and the overall average for all quarterbacks. So we're looking at the bottom of the quarterbacks. That would be the 0 to 24th percentile. That means pretty much they're playing a snap every once in a while. 25th to 49th, still pretty much not your main guys. 50th to 74th, these potentially played segments or multiple games, maybe a fourth of a season, third, whatever. And then the best quarterbacks would be the top 25%. That would be the 75th to the 100th percentile. So again, looking at the year and then all the quarterbacks and then slicing their those guys up by their end of the season fantasy point average. Their overall average for the year 2000 was 116.5. This is assuming 4 points for a touchdown, 1 point for 25 yards passing, the traditional scoring for most quarterbacks in PPR leagues. So I did also colorized from high to low, either blue or green, and the lowest years would be red. So part of my metrics is to understand what a year was and how it related to what's gone on previously. Is there something that I need to be worried about, or was last year kind of a continuation of patterns? So I think let's look at overall average of fantasy points. And in this way, I colorize low as yellow and high as purple. So if you look over 21 years, you can see since about 2012, we're pretty much in the golden era of quarterback production here, and we've been in that uh, uh, historical region for, like I said, since 2012. 2021 was not the worst, but it wasn't, certainly wasn't the highest here. So it was a little low compared to some of the earlier years, but nothing so dramatic that I would think 2022 will be anything unusual. So I don't think there's anything to be concerned with. And I think if you look at the top 25% quarterbacks at the end of the season, we see the same kind of mimicking of the increasing points. And you see that even this started in 2009. So it just kind of took a while to kind of catch up here which is kind of interesting to me. So certainly the league has changed, and people will say, oh, it's a passing league. Well, if we apply these scoring metrics, yeah, quarterbacks as a group are producing more points than they used to in the early 2000s. So things have changed. 2021, we had 341.9, so 342. Nothing in that number that suggests anything is going to be crazy in 2022. Even with COVID these last 2 years, things have been fine. So quarterbacks have prospered even under kind of some really more stringent conditions. So I don't think anything exists that we should worry about the quarterbacks, but I like to see that. So people say, well, we didn't worry about it anyway. Well, okay, but imagine that you're at 2007 and then all of a sudden 2008, you're like, wow, that's interesting. 2010, 11, all of a sudden you start seeing up, up, up. And then you hit 2012 and you're like, wow, things have really started to change. So there, you could catch a pattern coming up. So maybe you could have got in on maybe the worth of quarterbacks before everybody else was catching on at that point. I mean, that's what can happen. So we'll see. But for right now, nothing here suggests there anything different's going to happen in 2022 season that we can see in the tea leaves from the last 21 years. And if you look and you graph out this, the red are the top 25% quarterbacks into the season, and the green are the next 25% down. So we're talking the top half of all quarterbacks. And you can look at the differences, and it seems to me the differences have been kind of expanding over the last few years, which is kind of interesting. I thought it was kind of interesting, and that's continued here. And we're seeing that kind of uh, difference here. So I think, and you can see about 2010, 11, 12, we really are in this new era here of high passing, high point quarterbacks here. And people have discussed late quarterback drafting, these kind of things. And I think having a lot of quarterbacks scored a lot of points probably has brought forth this draft strategy here. I will point out that the extreme differences in the top and the next tier down have been increasing. So it looks like uh, uh, probably in your draft, it's going to be harder to have a backup quarterback if you lose your main quarterback, that you'll find a replacement. So that is a little bit more risky than we might have seen. Look at the differences here. It was a little bit closer. So that is something I've taken away. I hadn't heard a lot of people discussing that. I mean, that's, people don't try to be concerned about that, but I do. Kind of like, what's the worst that can happen? So I will say, if your stress level is high in a one quarterback league, then maybe, make yourself feel better, get rid of your cognitive dissonance, as it were. You can, get another a quarterback. It depends on your bench size as well, but I wouldn't wait too late because you may not be happy with what you get. In a super flex, we're probably talking a different scenario here. But anyway, that's what I see on the data, and we've seen an increase. But if you look, uh, the 50th percentile guys, if you look, are kind of back the way they were. They went up the high a little bit, but the top quarterbacks have never gone back to these early 2000 values. So it things have changed a little bit in the population. Just good to know that. Okay, so I did the same kind of slicing and dicing each year, looking at the bottom and the top quarterbacks, looking at passing attempts. So you would think that if there's a lot of scoring, we might see a lot more attempts than usual, and you can kind of see a trend and whatnot. Again, I colorized the 50th to 74th percentile and the top 25 percentile and the overall yearly average here. So let's talk about that. We're talking that some of the lows was like 2005, 2007, and the highs have been 2013 and 12. So be aware that passing attempts have not really skyrocketed like you might think as a group overall. Okay. Just looking at everybody. But if you look at the top 25% quarterbacks, yeah, we're kind of okay. Nothing has really dramatically changed. So I interpret that to mean that if you're not in the top group of quarterbacks, you're not getting as much passing opportunity here. And I think some of this data, certainly from 2016 down, is kind of suggesting that. I mean, 2021, we were at 255, and that was as good or below 2002 and 1 for that same. So that was really a dramatic shift in the last couple of years in the second tier quarterbacks, these next 25 percentile. So I think a lot of people are getting good at picking the top persons and are not making as many errors in missing some of these so-called sleeper quarterbacks. So I'm not sure. Let's just say I'd be aware you can't wait too late in getting your top quarterback here. I think you risk some disappointments here. So the late quarterback probably is holding, but maybe not as good as it was in the other years previous. And again, I haven't seen anybody, and you won't see anybody discussing this. Okay, so uh, just be aware that in your drafting plans, don't wait too late. That doesn't mean pick the top quarterback. Okay, I still do like a late quarterback shift, but I wouldn't wait too late. Okay, and you need to kind of for yourself look at ADPs and things in the summer where you're comfortable. What's the last quarterback off the board before you're like, uh-oh, you do need to know that line in the sand, folks. And I would definitely want to know that. Okay, so trend lines, we have seen that the passing was pretty good in early 2001 and 2, but it has never seen this level here around 550. So passing attempts are higher in the top quarterbacks, and we've seen kind of a nice shift up, but I do know the last couple of years have seen some declines even below what we've seen previously in the 50th to 74th. So that just kind of concerns me, this difference here. Kind of like all the passes are going to the top folks, whereas, and maybe injuries have been good the last few years, whatever. Just be aware that's kind of this trend here as far as passing attempts, not rushing, but passing. Okay, let's move on to rushing attempts. Okay. I believe that there has been a shift in higher rushing attempts recently. Again, here's the year, the different slices of quarterbacks, and the average rushing attempts per each group here are the whole quarterbacks. And again, I colorized high is purple, low is yellow. So there was a time, '03 to '09, which some of the lowest ever rushing. So we had no rushing quarterbacks, but I do know 2000, 2001, we did have some rushing quarterbacks, and look at 2018 and then the last 2 years. So the last 2 years have seen nice passing attempts, maybe not, spectacular, but are nice. And we see rushing has gone up. So now the value, okay, the value of a rushing quarterback has certainly been enhanced in the last 4 years of data. And if you look at the top 25 in the last 3 years, 19, 20, 21, it has really been the case. So I think most people are awake to this now. This is not surprising. Everybody's on top of that, so it becomes more common and it's less valuable. But I definitely will say that rushing is something that now has to be considered. I did a principal component analysis last year in for quarterbacks. You'll go back to that lesson, PCA of quarterbacks, and you'll see that the rushing aspect was a individual component in how we should rate quarterbacks. And again, nothing earth shattering there. I do see that even in the 74th to 50th percentile quarterbacks, that we're those next tier folks are rushing pretty good as well. So that has kind of played out throughout there. It's not like there's something dramatically only with the top guys. So trend wise, how does this look? If we look at trends here, I love the visual, and we can see 2000, 2001, and then we had this valley here, and we then had a recovery, and now we're at some of the highest we've ever been, 19, 20, 21. So I'm not sure if that's just who's on the scene, or are teams now drafting more rushing quarterbacks? Are they letting rushing quarterbacks get in earlier, like younger quarterbacks that are able to rush? And we see in the next tier down, the next 25% down in green here, we see that that has kind of not been as dramatic, but we've leveled down and then increased slowly. So I think we can say rushing is here to stay, and we've experienced the last 3 years. Now, with that said, uh, I don't know, and I don't know if anybody knows this, the injury level in rushing quarterbacks. Is that an extra risk when we draft some of those people? I mean, there has been, some discussion about, when quarterbacks should and shouldn't rush. And I think there's probably a shift in age that the younger quarterbacks are probably rushing more than the later, more aged quarterbacks that are trying to be more the pocket passers and stay in. And I think somebody like Russell Wilson has showed that transition here. And I don't think he's going to necessarily go back and turn the age clock back and act like he did, moving to Denver the way he used to be. So do realize at some point the time is up for all quarterbacks, their age is going to catch up, and they just cannot do the rushing like they did. So don't, if you're in Dynasty especially, don't wait too long. In other words, if you think a quarterback is getting a lot of points from rushing and maybe they're not as great of a passer, then you don't want to hold on to them as long. Maybe you don't want to wait till it's clear to everybody here that they're not rushing and their luster's kind of off. So just, if I'm in Dynasty, I'm aware of that. Okay, next thing, passing attempts versus. Okay, so the last slide in this lesson here is, me, I like to think about metrics in ratios. I think that sometimes allows us to compare kind of the oranges and apples. That's about the only way to do it, is kind of a ratio. And so what I did was calculated in the top 25 percentile quarterbacks from each year, 2000 to 2021, the number of rushing attempts, the average versus the average passing attempts in those quarterbacks that year. And I colorized purple to yellow. Yellow's low, purple's high. And I think what we see is if you plot the ratio, and again, the higher the ratio, the more rushing. So this is high rushing, low rushing. Okay, if you look, so we had high rushing, low rushing, and now look, when I said extreme, folks, I think the extreme is seen in the ratio. So it may not have been as clear, but I think ratios can give you a little bit more handle on the rushing extremes. And I think some people kind of miss that. And I'm telling you, there's some extremes going on here in the last 3 years. And I suspect success then drives then the drafting of the next round of quarterbacks. Everybody wants the next Josh Allen or Mahomes or what they want, that rushing youngin, as it were. So that's going to add luster to those that maybe are not 100% on the passing game yet, right? They've got to mature into that kind of Brady, Drew Brees kind of professionalism on passing here. And so the rushing is a way to, still be very productive. So I think you definitely have to keep that in mind. Think about the rushing versus passing. In rookie quarterbacks, I'm sure there's plenty of metrics out there for you to get a feel for rushing and passing attempts. I suggest you kind of be aware of that. There's so much information out there. This may get lost in the shuffle, but I would definitely kind of weed through some of the, you know, buzzwords and whatnot to try to get to just plain passing and rushing and the ratio of some of these so-called top quarterback prospects. That's how I would definitely want to start looking at them as well. I mean, certainly other factors, height and athleticness, talent, but I think rushing and passing, if it wasn't emphasized, should be emphasized. That balance between the two, one needs to look at that. And so that would be my hint for dynasty players and those who are looking at drafting rookie quarterbacks on their teams, late in redraft. You might definitely like to see that as well. Okay, I think that's all I've got to say now about this block of material. So this is lesson 112, and uh, so please come back. We will continue with lesson 113 coming up. Woo woo, is this fun or what? See you guys.